Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back for the second section of Descartes' second meditation. This is where he presents an argument for how this I must exist. So, just a reminder of where we left off. So at the end of the first section, which is commonly referred to as the cogito, after the Latin phrase for his argument, cogito ergo sum, Descartes has reached one piece of absolute certainty, and that is his own existence. And if you remember, he discounted the idea that he exists as a body because information about his body comes from the senses and they're potentially false. It gives, this is the dream argument, where he suggests that, he's been sure that he's seen things or felt things or smelt things or heard things before, but they have been in a dream, and as such he can never be sure if he's dreaming or not. So he can't be sure that he exists as a body, as that may just be a dream. He also cannot trust the content of his thought, and this links to the evil deceiver argument that we saw him make. So this is where he presents the idea that there might be an all-powerful evil deceiver that is fooling him every time that he thinks. So he can't be sure what he is thinking, but the one piece of certainty that he can reach is that he is thinking. So if you remember, right at the end of the first section, he doesn't end with, but it's towards the end, he finishes with, I am, I exist. What we're going to be looking at now is how this I must exist. So he's going to try and figure out what this I is that is existing. Sounds a little bit confusing, but let's jump into it. One quick note that this reading, or this section of the reading, may end up stretching over 2 recordings just because of the length of it, but we'll see how we go. So, books out, highlighters in hand, pens in hand, ready to annotate as we go. We're picking up directly from where we left off, so if you've got your reader book, you should be open to the page that says Second Meditation, the nature of the human mind and how it is better known than the body. And we're on the right-hand side, starting at the second paragraph, but I do not yet have a sufficient understanding, is where we're starting from. What we're going to see now is Descartes entering a process of thought to determine how he must exist, and he's going to very quickly run through a series of different, or potential answers. That is, that he exists as a man, and that he exists as a rational animal. These two are discounted in about a sentence. That he exists as a body, although as we've already talked about, this has its problems. That he exists as a soul, which is now starting to sort of dip his toe into the dualist argument, before finally landing on defining this I that exists as a thinking thing. So we'll see Descartes explain why each potential answer is not satisfactory, sometimes very quickly, so try and keep up, before finally landing on the thinking thing. So here we go, back to the reading. But I do not yet have a sufficient understanding of what this I is that is now necessarily existing, that now necessarily exists. So I must be on my guard against carelessly taking something else to be this I, and so making a mistake in the very item of knowledge that I maintain is the most certain and evident of all. I will therefore go back and meditate on what I originally believed myself to be before I embarked on this present train of thought. So Descartes here is saying, well, I'm going to go back and think about, well, what are those common ideas of what I is? Let's take a look at those. I will then subtract anything capable of being weakened, even minimally, by the arguments now introduced, so that what is left at the end may be exactly and only what is certain and unshakable. So again, Descartes repeating his method here, that he's not going to disprove things. Instead, he's only going to show that things can be doubted. They have the potential to be false, not that they are false. He wants something that cannot even be thought of to be false, to be the rock that he starts his knowledge on again. So he's looking for that absolute certainty. What then did I formerly think I was? A man. So this is the first notion of how he must exist. But what is a man? Shall I say a rational animal? Now this is a bit of a link back to ancient Greece, where a lot of the philosophers argued that this is how man is different to animal, that man is just like animal in every way except one crucial one, and that is that man has the ability for rational thought. That rational thought is what separates us from them and gives us, I guess, special privileges. So Descartes here is connecting back to an old idea of what man is, namely that man is different from everything else because man is a rational animal. No, he says, for then I should have to inquire what an animal is, what rationality is, and in this way one question would lead me down the slope to harder ones, and I do not now have the time to waste on subtleties of this kind. So Descartes is immediately dismissing the argument that he exists as a man, or the argument that he exists as a rational animal, because it would just lead down this endless path of definitions that he doesn't want to go into right now. He really doesn't want to be wasting time thinking, well, what is a man? A man is this, but then what's that? Well, it could be this, but then what's that? He wants to try and reach a conclusion more quickly. He feels like this idea of man or a rational animal, because it's open to this sort of questioning in terms of, we might call it linguistic questioning. In other words, well, can you truly define these things clearly or satisfactorily is probably a better way to put it. Descartes doesn't want to go into that. It leads to what is referred to as infinite regression, where you're constantly just going, but what if, but what if, but what if, but what if, never actually reaching a conclusion. And remember, the whole purpose of this is for Descartes to reach certainty. So he doesn't want to go down that path. So let's continue on. Instead, I propose to concentrate on what came into my thoughts spontaneously and quite naturally whenever I used to consider what I was. Well, the first thought that came to mind was that I had a face, hands, arms, and the whole mechanical structure of limbs which can be seen in a corpse, and which I call the body. So here he's talking about our physical existence, what it is that makes you physically. Now, as we know, he's going to show that this is false very quickly because he's already dealt with this argument. So let's continue. The next thought was that I was nourished, that I moved about, and that I engaged in sense perception and thinking, and these actions attributed by to the soul. So here we've got Descartes suggesting, well, maybe there's two levels to existence. There's the physical essence, and then there's these other things like nourishment, so the ability to be sustained, sense perception and understanding of the world around us, and also thinking, that internal sort of monologue that we have going on. These, by the way, are the things that separate a living person from a corpse. You heard Descartes before reference the idea of a corpse. They can be seen in a corpse. Well, what separates a corpse from someone who's living is that a living person has nourishment. They have sense perception. They have thought. He's saying, could these potentially be attributes of the soul? So again, Descartes sort of bringing in the religious argument here. Continuing on. But as to the nature of this soul, either I did not think about this, or else I imagined it to be something tenuous, like a wind or fire or ether, which permeated my more solid parts. So this, it's really any argument to do with the soul is like this. Well, what is the soul? It's just this thing that animates your body. We hear this presented by basically every religion that believes in an afterlife of some kind, which is all of them. And so we've got this idea of, well, what is it? It's kind of like the wind. It is what moves through you and animates you. Descartes, being religious, probably does believe in the soul, but to his credit, he's not going to allow that belief to get in the way of the process that he put out, which is that he is going to try and find certainty. And to say that something is like the wind or fire or ether, which permeates my more solid parts, well, it's a very unsatisfactory answer. So we're going to see Descartes move on from it quickly. As to the body, however, I had no doubts about it, but thought I knew its nature distinctly, so very clearly. If I had tried to describe the mental conception I had of it, I would have expressed it as follows. By a body, he's going to define body here, I understand whatever has a determinable shape and a definable location, and can occupy a space in such a way as to exclude any other body. So, what is a physical thing? It is something, we've talked about this idea of extension. It extends into the physical world, into, as Descartes says, to occupy a space in such a way as to exclude any other body. So, nothing can take up the same physical space as your body. So, continuing on, and we're going to see the senses brought in here. It can be perceived by touch, sight, hearing, taste, or smell, and it can be moved in various ways, not by itself, but by whatever else comes into contact with it. So this last little bit is a real little teaser for the dualist argument. The idea that a body cannot move by itself, but by whatever else comes into contact with it is an interesting one. Now, if we think of something like a rock, well, a rock's not going to do anything until something comes into contact with it. It will sit there until some sort of force acts upon it, and then it will move. What Descartes is saying is that all physical entities are like that, including our body. Therefore, what is it that makes our body move? Well, it must be something else. It must be something non-physical, which is influencing our body to move. Just like you can push a rock off a ledge, there's something else that moves your body. This is a little teaser for the interaction between the body and the mind, which he elaborates on later in the meditations. But yeah, so for according to my judgment, the power of self-movement, like the power of sensation or of thought, is quite foreign to the nature of the body. Indeed, it was a source of wonder to me that certain bodies were found to contain faculties of this kind. Sort of just talking here about the idea that, well, what is it that allows some bodies to move and others that don't? Well, it's a very mysterious thing. Why can we move independently when a rock can't? Maybe there's something different to us than there is to a rock. Continuing on, but what shall I now say that I am when I am supposing that there is some supremely powerful and, if it is permissible to say so, malicious deceiver who is deliberately trying to trick me in every way he can? So Descartes again is bringing up the evil deceiver argument here. Can I now assert that I possess even the most insignificant of all the attributes which I have just said belong to the nature of the body? I scrutinize them, think about them, go over them again, but nothing suggests itself. It is tiresome and pointless to go through the list once more. He's already dealt with these concerns, so he's sort of saying, you know these issues, let's move on. But what about the attributes I assign to the soul? Nutrition or movement? Since now I do not have a body, these are mere fabrications. Sense perception? This surely does not occur without a body. And besides, when asleep, again bring up the dream argument, I have appeared to perceive through the senses many things which I afterwards realized I did not perceive through the senses at all. Thinking? At last, I have discovered it. Thought. Probably one of the most important little sentences here. This alone is inseparable from me. If nothing else, this clearly outlines Descartes' present argument. This alone is inseparable from me. So without a body, which he's already discounted previously, there's nothing to nourish, so nourishment is an illusion. Without a body, there can be no sense perception. Just like in dreams, our senses aren't actually picking things up. This is all an illusion. What is it that isn't an illusion? Is the thought, the actual process of thinking. So this alone is inseparable from me. Very important. I am, I exist. That is certain. But for how long? For as long as I am thinking. For it could be that were I totally to cease from thinking, I should totally cease to exist. This is a bit of a tricky little part where Descartes is essentially saying if you stop thinking, you stop existing. But if thinking is the definition of existence, then it sort of works. I'm very quickly running out of time here, so I'll try and get to the end of the paragraph. At present, I am not admitting to anything except what is necessarily true. I am then, in the strict sense, only a thing that thinks. That is, I am a mind. So here's the definition of what we are. Or intelligence or intellect or reason, words whose meanings I have been ignorant of until now. But for all that, I am a thing which is real and which truly exists. But what kind of thing? As I have just said, a thinking thing. Alright, we'll pick up in the next video.